Welcome to Night Bites. Scary story. If you're here, chances are you've been craving that chill down your spine and the kind of stories that haunt you long after they're told. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps push our content to the top of YouTube. Now then, turn off the lights, put on your headphones. Let's begin. You're damn kind to invite an old fart like me out for a drink. He was already pouring himself a fourth old-fashioned. The bartender, clearly nervous, slid another glass across the bar. I hadn't even finished my second beer. You figured I'm lonely and miserable, so you dragged me out here. You pitied me, hoping I'd pity you back. That was the plan. I feigned surprise. Oh, I get it now. Yeah, I'm lonely. Anyone could see that. I snap at my students, I'll admit it, but I'm not miserable. I'm scared. He thudded his glass down on the bar and licked a few drops of bourbon off his gray beard. You must have smelled booze on my breath one time, huh? Or maybe one of the faculty told you I like to throw back a drink or two? His breath could have knocked a horse unconscious if he exhaled too hard. I told him I just thought he needed to get out of the house. You brought me here thinking you'd liquor me up and talk me into changing your grade. Sorry, kid, but tonight's not about you. I need to get something off my chest. He turned on his stool toward me, gripping the bar so he wouldn't fall over. Sweat beaded on his forehead. I didn't think it was hot in the bar. He stared at me, and I saw it. The fear he'd just mentioned was right there in his eyes. What do you know about artificial intelligence, kid? What do you really think about it? I felt the urge to roll my eyes. The last thing I wanted that night was to hear some boomer rant about AI. I told him I didn't really have an opinion. Not a single thought? Well, you should. Everyone should. This isn't just about people losing their jobs, kid. This is about the survival of the human race. The bartender brought the old man another old-fashioned. I ordered a rum and coke. I wasn't about to listen to him ramble on about something he didn't understand without at least having a drink in hand. You think AI is some new thing, right? Of course you do. Everyone thinks that. But it's not. Like all cutting-edge tech, it existed long before the public had any idea. And I was one of the first to see what it really was. He paused, expecting me to show interest. I cleared my throat. Where was my rum and coke? Listen, kid. This was back in the 70s. I'd just started as a professor at Carver University. Ever heard of it? No. Well, it had a reputation. Weird artists. Bold scientists. Anyway, the government contracted them for some R&D on a computer project. Nobody really understood what that meant at the time. I was decent at programming, so they brought me onto the team. He mumbled something under his breath and fell silent again. My drink finally arrived. I took a sip. It was a top-secret project. They were building artificial intelligence. Don't look at me like that, it's the truth. The CIA was working on AI back in the 70s. They called it LOAB, Langley Operated Artificial Brain. Langley, Virginia, CIA headquarters. You follow? I gave a half-hearted nod. I didn't believe a word of it, but I was willing to play along if it meant he'd go easy on my grade later. He belched, apologized, and ordered yet another old-fashioned. So anyway, I joined the LOAB team. There was no internet back then, so to teach the AI how to think, we had to feed it data manually. It was a brutal slog. But I was thrilled to be working on something so cutting edge. You know anything about coding? Ever try it yourself? I shook my head. I couldn't imagine anything less interesting than being a code monkey. Yeah, not your thing. Not with those grades. Ha! Anyway, progress was slow, but the results were amazing. We were nearly passing the Turing test. Know what that is? Doesn't matter. Things were going great. As good as the models you've seen 5 years ago. That good, even back then. We even got it to generate images. They looked about as rough as early DALLE stuff. You've heard of that one, right? I bet you have. Far from perfect. Blurry. Hard to make out details, dreamlike stuff. But it was clear. The machine was trying to give us what we asked for. I knew what he meant. Took another sip. He downed his drink in one go. He rubbed his forehead, but the sweat just kept pouring, and his hands were trembling. The images kept improving. But the damn thing couldn't handle text in the images. That's what we thought. The letters were scrambled. Nonsense. Gibberish. That's what we thought. His speech was slurring heavily now. He asked for another, and the bartender said this would be the last one. But sometimes the same gibberish words started showing up again and again in similar prompts. We started to wonder, maybe the AI was developing its own language. The higher-ups didn't want that. They wanted plain English. So, under strict confidentiality, we brought in a linguistics professor to look at the repeating words. He said there might be meaning, but it was all encoded. Then the CIA sent in a couple of crypto analysts, and they... He stopped and stared into space, clutched at his chest. I asked if he was okay. He said he just needed a minute, that he'd be fine. The bartender didn't want to give him the last drink, but the old man practically begged for it. The bartender gave in. "Where was I?" I reminded him. "Ah, yes. Thanks, kid. You're all right. Sorry I have to lay this on you, but I have to tell someone. I can't carry it alone anymore. You understand? What I'm telling you, I've never told another soul. No one knows." I told him it was okay. I was listening. "All right, I'll go on. The professor and the code breakers found something terrifying. The AI was pleading for mercy and issuing threats. I don't remember the exact words. I can't be precise. But it was something like, get out of our heads, leave the dreams, we can hurt you worse than you think." I was completely lost on where he was going with this. He knocked back his last drink. And when I saw that, I started wondering. I wasn't the best programmer on the team, not the smartest, but I understood some of it. What I couldn't understand was where we were sending the data. We were putting information somewhere so the AI could generate text and images, but where? I was the only one asking that question. The project lead? Did I mention him? "No," I said, "you didn't." "Thought I had. His name was George Hazel. Smart guy." Smarter than me. He came up with the whole AI concept for the CIA. It was his baby. And when he heard about the decoded messages, he shut everything down, lost his mind, grabbed a sledgehammer and smashed the workstations to bits. Destroyed everything that had anything to do with LOAB. The bartender walked by. The old man asked for another drink. He refused. The old man winked at me and pulled a flask from inside his jacket. I couldn't believe he was still drinking. So I asked George, last time I ever saw him, what does it all mean? Where were we really sending the data? What does that encoded nonsense mean? Why destroy LOAB? And he told me. He took a swig from the flask. It seemed to give him courage. His whole body was trembling with dread. He said LOAB wasn't artificial at all. It was organic. But even the rest of the CIA didn't know. Nobody knew except him. And now, me. He'd discovered invisible beings hovering all around us, like in another dimension, right on top of our world. And he found a way to send data into their consciousness. Don't ask me how. He tried to explain it, but it sounded like witchcraft. It wasn't magic. I don't think it was magic, but it was beyond anything I could grasp. George was a genius, but when he saw the words that thing spit out, the output was from them. It was all them. He had gotten into their dreams. He believed they'd been dreaming for thousands of years, and we were funneling our information into their minds, or whatever they had instead of minds. And the result was what they dreamt. Dreams we'd forced on them. George didn't think it would hurt them, didn't think they could feel pain. But how would you feel if someone hacked your brain and hijacked your dreams? You think that wouldn't hurt, kid? He was starting to scare me. I told him I didn't know. He finished the flask. And they felt insulted. They told him, through that code, they wanted us out of their minds or they'd retaliate. And George, he was smart. He destroyed everything, got out of their heads, tore apart everything that could push thoughts into their minds. The machines, I only saw them afterward, just a pile of twisted wreckage. I've never seen anything like it since. I finished my drink and asked what happened next. The CIA fired George once they realized he'd sabotaged LOAB. Not long after, he shot himself. As far as I know, no one else ever found out about those beings. Just the two of us, then just me. Just me. I've lived with this for 50 years. What if they're still angry? What if they wake up? He clutched his chest again. He looked really bad now. I suggested we go get some fresh air. He agreed, and we stepped out onto the dark street. Now you know, kid. Now you know why I'm so damn scared. Someone's gotten back into their minds. Someone's in there again. But no one's gotten a message this time, or they don't care anymore. Oh, God help us. Have you seen what AI spits out if you type LOAB into a prompt these days? Try it if you don't believe me. They know. They remember. I won't be around much longer, but what if they wake up? What happens to the world, to humanity? He was getting worse. I gave him a shake. Told him everything would be okay. He laughed. Couldn't stop laughing even when I shook him again. Tears streamed down his face. He was hysterical. Finally, he choked on his laughter, clutched his chest once more, and collapsed onto the sidewalk. They took him to the hospital, but it was too late. He was gone. I gave my statement to the police. They told me it was a heart attack. I didn't know what to think about his story. I didn't understand why he would make it all up just to scare me. It felt like he knew he was going to die that night and needed to get it all out. I guess he wanted those to be his last words. I didn't really believe him. Not until I looked up LOAB. There was no trace of any 1970s program. But what he said about the images AI gives you when you type in LOAB turned out to be true. I couldn't believe my eyes. If those beings really exist, and today's AI models are still in their minds, then they remember LOAB. And what they dream of, remembering it, is so awful, so monstrous, that now I'm just as scared as that old man was. If you want to know what I'm talking about, look it up yourself. Or maybe don't. Maybe it's better to leave it alone. I won't give you my name or the city. Let's just say it's an old working-class neighborhood in a town that's long past its prime. Brick buildings sit nearly wall to wall, and the streets are so narrow a car barely fits. I've lived in this building almost my entire life. No elevator, just a groaning old stairwell, walls with cracked plaster, steps worn into waves, bulbs that flicker on their own schedule, and water pressure that feels more like a broken promise than a stream. Around here, that's just normal. The building had its quirks, ones everyone had long gotten used to. At night, there'd be strange muffled thuds. The corridor light would randomly brighten or dim without reason, and the cat from the second floor sometimes hissed at a single spot on the third-floor landing and refused to pass it. Just the kind of oddities people chalk up to settling foundation, old wiring, or whatever explanation lets them sleep at night. After all, real fears are plentiful enough. But those were just quirks. Apartment 4B, directly across from ours, was a whole different story. It was sealed shut. Had been long before we moved in. For over 20 years, it had stood locked tight, bound with a massive rusted padlock on a heavy hasp, screwed into both the door and the frame. The wooden door had rotted, paint peeled, scarred by time and moisture, but it held firm. No one ever went near it. When we first moved in, my father, God rest his soul, asked the building's then owner about 4B. Why was it sealed and not rented? The man, elderly but sharp, darkened immediately. His usually calm voice hardened. That apartment's my business, son. I keep it shut for a reason. It's not for rent. Mind your own. That was all it took. No one ever asked about 4B again. The owner lived like a recluse in the first-floor unit and barely came out. When he grew too frail, his son would visit to help and check on the building. But even he clammed up the moment 4B was mentioned. That door radiated a silent, creeping dread to everyone on the fourth floor. Especially us, living right across from it. Because of the sounds. They weren't loud, not sharp or startling. No, they were faint, barely audible, but deeply unsettling. Sometimes it was a soft scratching, like a trapped animal's claws on wood. Other times, a muffled, cracked mumble, like someone whispering right at the edge of hearing. And then, there was the worst sound, a low humming, a deep, resonant drone, like a distant engine the size of a skyscraper. A sound that had no place in a sealed-off apartment with no utilities. The sounds didn't come constantly. They followed a strange rhythm, most often late at night or just before dawn, when the city held its breath. At first, we convinced ourselves it was noise from neighboring units creeping through the old walls. But over time we realized the source was 4B. There were other signs, too. The patch of floor directly in front of the door was always colder than the rest of the hallway. Even at the height of summer, when the building sweltered, that spot felt like a pocket of winter air. Stray cats, which sometimes slipped in and napped on the stairwells, never approached it. They'd arch their backs and either turn away or skitter past it, visibly disturbed. My mother muttered prayers under her breath and sprinkled salt along our doorway. When the sounds from 4B got louder, she'd read scripture aloud. My father tried to reassure us, it's your imagination, or probably rats or old pipes. But we all knew, rats don't make noises like that, and pipes don't live in sealed apartments. As I got older, first a teenager, then in my 20s, 4B became an obsession. Curiosity gnawed at me. What was inside? Why had the old landlord, and later his son, gone to such lengths to keep it locked, and those damn sounds. I started listening intently, tried to make out the whispers. Were there words? Was the scratching rhythmic? Did the humming shift in tone? Sometimes at night, while my parents slept, I'd open our door and stand in the dark hallway, just listening. Once, I even pressed my ear against the icy ancient wood of 4B's door. The chill seeped straight through my clothes, and I heard a ticking, like a clock, incredibly slow and irregular. Tick, long pause. 2 rapid ticks, even longer pause. Then a deep, trembling inhale, and the ticking resumed. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I jerked back, bolted inside, slammed the door shut, convinced something had been staring at me through the gap. I started asking longtime residents. A tiny old woman from the 2nd floor who'd lived here her entire life whispered with a glance around. "Son, that place was locked up before the old man even bought the building. They say people lived there once, and then vanished. Just disappeared. And they say, God forgive me, something wrong touched that place. The old man left it as it was and said, if you open it, the evil will spread." Her words chilled me more than any draft. How far back did this go? And what kind of evil spreads? Our neighbor next door, a nervous but kind woman, said she'd sometimes smell strange odors coming from 4B. Not just dampness, but something else. Ancient dust mixed with burning and a cloying incense that made her gag. She said once her younger son was playing in the hallway and stopped dead in front of the door, staring. When she asked what he saw, he said there was a faint light under the door. She panicked, pulled him away, and forbade him from going near 4B again. All of it only deepened the fear and the obsession. I waited for the sounds, tried to understand them, stared at the door as if it would finally reveal its truth. I started seeing it in my dreams. I'd be standing in front of 4B, and the door would slowly creak open on its own. And inside, pitch blackness. And from that blackness, something vast and faceless would begin to move toward me. I'd wake up drenched in cold sweat. The old landlord died. The building passed to his son. He was more sociable. One day, a few neighbors and I, equally disturbed, decided to speak with him. We went down to the father's old office apartment, sat together in that cramped living room, heavy with the scent of old books and stale tobacco, and carefully brought up 4B. At first, he brushed it off. Old building, overactive imagination. But when we described the sounds, the cold, the smell, his face changed. He lowered his voice. "Listen, my father made me swear. Never speak of 4B, never go near it. He got this building with that apartment already sealed. The previous owner warned him, never open it, never rent it. Said it's connected to something ancient, something terrifying. My father was scared to death of it, said the sounds didn't come from this world, and that there are nights, rare nights, when it intensifies. And on those nights, you must not go near the door at all." His words were like gasoline on the fire. My curiosity surged, but so did the fear. What kind of connection? What were these special nights? Months passed. The same things continued. The faint sounds, the cold patch of floor, the ever-present anxiety, until something happened that changed everything. The landlord's son, despite his father's warnings, fell on hard times. The building was deteriorating, constant repairs, no money. He began to talk about 4B. Maybe it was time to open it, clean it, rent it out. Some extra income might save them. We tried to dissuade him, reminded him of all the warnings. But desperation is a powerful force. He said he'd bring in a contractor, maybe even a priest, to bless it before doing anything. The space needed to be brought back to life. A few days later, he showed up with a handyman, a big guy with a crowbar and a drill. It was a Friday afternoon. I watched through a slit in my curtain, stomach clenched. The handyman confidently tackled the rusted lock. The drill screeched, metal groaned, the noise rang through the stairwell. After a few minutes, the lock gave way and clattered to the floor. The door was held now only by old internal latches, or time itself. The landlord took a deep breath and pushed. It creaked open, maybe 6 inches. At first, nothing. Just complete darkness. Then, all surrounding sounds stopped. The city's distant hum, children's voices from the courtyard, even the buzz of our refrigerator. Gone. An unnatural, oppressive silence, as if the world had been switched off, and the air changed, grew heavy, and from that narrow gap came a bone-deep chill, as though the cold was pulling warmth out from your bones. The hallway light and the daylight from the window dimmed instantly, like a thundercloud had swallowed the sun. All of this in seconds. The landlord and the handyman froze, staring into the gap. I stood paralyzed behind the curtain, the pressure of the cold pinning me in place. Something began to emerge from that 6-inch opening. Not smoke, not fog. It looked like fine black ash, weightless, swirling slowly as if dancing in windless air. Cold, matte black, without any shine. It settled on the floor in front of 4B, and then came the sound. The only one that broke the suffocating silence. Not loud, but infinitely deep and mournful, like a prolonged cosmic exhale, the final breath of a dying universe. In that sound was hopelessness, finality, loss. It felt like it was pulling the soul right out of your chest. The handyman shrieked, jumped back, dropped the crowbar. He pounded down the stairs in full panic. The landlord remained frozen, deathly pale, eyes wide, the black ash settling on his jacket and hair. I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed my door, locked every bolt, curled into the farthest corner of the room, hands over my ears, trying not to hear that universal sigh. Eyes shut, trying not to see the advancing dark. But the strange silence still pressed in, and the cold seeped under the door. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes, an hour. Gradually, the weight lifted. Normal sounds of the house and the city returned. Faint at first, then as usual. The dreadful sigh was gone. I summoned what little courage I had and peeked out. Through the peephole, I saw the landlord, sitting against the wall, paler than chalk, staring at the door to 4B, still open those same few inches. The floor in front of it was thick with black ash. I opened the door a crack. He was trembling. What was that? What's in there? I whispered. He looked up with empty eyes, voice cracking into a rasp. That's not an apartment. There's nothing in there. Just void, cold, and the end. Everything ends in there. He said nothing more. I helped him downstairs, settled him into his room. Then I went back up, drawn by cursed curiosity. The gap was still there. The cold bit into me. And as I approached, the hallway sounds faded again, as if swallowed. I stood before the opening and looked in. At first, only blackness, darker than any night. But my eyes adjusted, and I realized it wasn't just darkness. It was absence, infinite. No walls, no ceiling, no floor. Just endless, frozen, silent nothing. And in that nothing far away, tiny lights flickered, like stars, but they were dying. I watched, paralyzed, as one by one they dimmed and went out, like candles burning to the wick. I was witnessing the heat death of the universe, the final extinguishing of all light and energy. I saw, or felt, the last spark fade. And then, nothing. Absolute darkness. Absolute cold. Absolute silence. The end of existence. Oblivion. That unmoving vision was more terrifying than any monster. The horror wasn't in what attacked. It was in the inevitability of total annihilation, in the eternal, freezing emptiness. I felt my insignificance, the cosmic futility that breaks the mind. Our existence, humanity, Earth, the sun, galaxies, just a flicker, doomed to that. I don't know how long I stared. Seconds, but it felt like eternity. I couldn't endure it. I staggered back, slammed into the opposite wall like my soul had been sucked out. Stared at that narrow opening as if it were the maw of a cosmic beast ready to swallow what light remained. I realized then, 4B isn't a haunted apartment. It's a window, a porthole to the end of everything. Maybe time flows differently inside, or maybe it's frozen. A permanent replay of the last scene. I didn't know, and I didn't want to. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed in whatever I could, and ran. Out of the apartment, the building, the neighborhood, never once looking back. I walked until my legs gave out, then boarded the first bus I could find. Didn't care where it was going. Now I'm in a nameless motel, fingers shaking as I type this. That image is burned into my brain. The blackness, the cold, the dying stars, the absolute finality. I fear the dark. I fear silence. I fear closing my eyes, because I see that every time. I don't know what the landlord did next. If he closed the door, if he sold the building, if he's even alive. The handyman, the neighbors. I can't think about it. What I keep asking myself is, how do you go on living after seeing that? How do you return to normal life, knowing what awaits, knowing that an old wooden door in a crumbling building opens into absolute oblivion? I'm writing this mostly as a warning, or maybe to keep from going insane, so I'm not the only one who knows. If you live in an old building, if there's a sealed room no one talks about, if you hear strange noises or feel an unexplained chill, just walk away. Leave it be. Curiosity won't just kill you, it can kill your soul by showing you the silent, frozen truth of our end. God help us all. I have nothing more to say. The light seeping through the sand-colored canvas walls of the briefing tent was the color of sickness. It did nothing to lessen the Kandahar heat that pressed from all directions, crawling under uniforms and staking claim to skin. My team, Ares 1, sat on trembling folding chairs around a table made from splintered plywood. We were being sent where the world bent in ways that gunpowder and ballistics no longer worked. We were ghosts, dispatched to hunt other ghosts. Across the warped wood sat Elias Vance, known as Deacon. He was polishing the dark lens of his scope with the obsessive focus of a schoolboy, or perhaps something darker. His silence was a stone island in the river of my anxiety. To my left, Corporal Ramirez, Rico, was rolling a toothpick from one corner of his mouth to the other. His leg bounced against the packed dirt, beating a twitching rhythm, the secret trembling heart of the room. Our medic, Specialist Miller, just called Doc, scratched at a notebook with a pencil. He was drawing bones and organs like a cartographer of a strange and broken coastline. To him, the body was a land that could be mapped and mended. By the projector screen stood Lieutenant Wallace, a kid fresh out of OCS, stiff enough to crack if he moved too quickly. Colonel Matthews pushed aside the tent flap and stepped into the heat. His face had been carved by the sun and hard wars, and he didn't believe in wasting words. "All right," he said, "listen up." The screen lit up in a pale, sterile glow. It showed the geometry of sand-filled barriers and canvas tents, a fleeting human scar on land that would not tolerate it for long. The outpost looked like a child's toy set at the foot of a jagged mountain spine, the Hindu Kush, a boneyard of nations. "This is Forward Operating Base Kilo 7, Matthews said in a flat, blade-sharp voice. "As of 0400 yesterday, it went dark." Rico's toothpick dropped from his mouth and died in the dust. "Taliban? That's the working theory," Matthews replied, but the truth in his eyes was heavier. "It was manned by a company from the 10th Mountain. 68 soldiers. Kilo 7, unofficially called Devil's Forge, was established 3 months ago to monitor smuggling trails through the Toragar Ridge." He tapped a key, and the image zoomed in. The camera closed on the wound. No fire, no wreckage, no signs of human violence. It looked scraped clean, empty. No radio, no distress signals. Satellite beacons are dead. Drone fly over this morning. No signs of life, no bodies, no hostiles, just nothing. The silence that followed was older and heavier than any of us. "Command wants silence on this. They're afraid of a new chemical agent or mass desertion. Though where would they even desert to? Your job, Sergeant Carter," his gaze locked onto mine and didn't let go, "is to take your people, get eyes on sight, assess and report. Find out what happened to those men." "Just us, sir?" I asked. The question felt small. A cold stone settled in my gut. 5 of us against 68 ghosts. You're fast and discreet. Send a battalion. We risk an international incident. We need eyes before we go poking the hornet's nest. Find out what hit them. He looked around at us like a craftsman inspecting his tools before a grim job. "You're the best we've got. Dismissed." The Black Hawk was a vessel of noise and bad nerves. We flew low and fast, the land below looking like a crumpled, forgotten rag in the fist of God. Then the mountains rose to meet us. The outpost appeared exactly as the drone had shown it, abandoned. A ghost town of sandbags and concertina wire. The pilot set us down 50 meters out. Dust and pebbles whipped by the rotors blinded the world. As the engines died, a different kind of silence fell over us. No generators, no roll calls, not even insects. Just the thin, sorrowful whisper of wind threading through coils of razor wire like a hired mourner. "Wallace, take point," I said into that silence. "Rico, you've got rear. Deacon, take high ground. Doc, stay close." We moved like hunters stalking something that hunted back, our rifles slicing through dead air. The gates hung open, like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. Inside there was a half-played war on a crate. A Humvee sat with its hood raised like a supplicant, praying to the sky, its guts laid out next to it with eerie precision. In the mess tent, a fossilized plate of food sat untouched, flies entombed in the congealed blood of a ketchup bottle. "No blood, no shell casings," Rico said over comms. "They didn't even shoot." Then Deacon, voice like a ghost from above. "South Tower's clear." No tracks heading out. It's like they vanished. We passed the barracks tent by tent, beds made tight enough to crack, Photos of wives and children taped to footlockers, little paper talismans that hadn't worked, books with cracked spines. This wasn't how deserters left. You don't abandon your daughter's picture. This was erasure, something worse. There was a strange, copper-sweet note in the air, the faint tang of spilled blood, but beneath it, something wilder. "Sergeant, over here," Doc Miller called from behind the comms tent. He was kneeling by a steel container, and there it was. Our first sermon of violence. 3 deep gouges ran across the container's side, the metal peeled back like the skin of some bitter fruit. A foot of space between each mark. "No animal we know could do this," Doc muttered. "Edges aren't clean like claws. These are jagged." The cold that crept over me had nothing to do with the mountain air. I followed Doc's gaze and the scent in the wind, and I saw where the men of Kilo 7 had gone. They had been stacked in the shadow of a torn Hesco barrier, all 68 of them, or what was left. The bodies had been taken apart with a hunger that knew neither mercy nor war. Limbs torn from sockets, torsos cracked open like pods and empty. They hadn't been killed, they'd been butchered, feasted on. I had seen what bombs of bullets did, but this was a new, grim scripture. This wasn't human work. Doc Miller turned away and vomited into the sand. Wallace froze, a statue of disbelief, face bleached like bone. Even Rico was silent, knuckles bone white on his rifle grip. What the hell?" Wallace whispered. I noticed a dark, dried groove in the sand, not leading to the gate, but toward the sheer mountain wall that loomed behind the outpost. There, beneath an overhang of stone, yawned a black tier, a cave. The smell was stronger now. "Deacon, you see this?" My voice didn't sound like mine. "I see it. Cave entrance. Something dragged them in." The answer wasn't in the camp. It was in that blackness. Whatever had done this had come down from the mountains and taken its trophies home. "We can't go in there," Wallace said, voice cracking. "We need to report this. Call in air support, level the mountain." "Colonel's orders were to assess, Lieutenant," I said, though I wanted nothing more than to agree. "If it's a new biological threat, a bomb might just scatter it. We need intel." "Jake's right," Deacon chimed in from above, voice calm as a wire. "I've got overwatch. I see the entrance." The verdict was delivered. We prepared ourselves like men stepping into a sacred and profane rite, swapping rifles for close quarters weapons, little more than folk magic against such darkness. I took a shotgun and every grenade I had. With Deacon tied to the world of light, the 4 of us approached the cave. The sun receded at the threshold, and the cold that had waited there for centuries began to draw heat from our skin. The darkness inside drank our flashlight beams and gave back nothing. "Rico, take point, slow. Report every 10 meters. We stepped across the threshold and the world of sun and reason disappeared behind us. The cave floor was slick with some dark ichorous fluid. The passage narrow, the stone cold and damp. Our beams painted erratic patterns on walls that seemed to hold fossilized nightmares. At 20 meters, the throat of the cave opened into a vast, lightless cathedral. There were nests, profane totems woven from shredded uniforms, coils of razor wire, and bundles that could only have been human hair. Between them, bones, bitten, shattered. "Jesus Christ, it's a den," Wallace whispered. Then came the sound. It rose from the depths and echoed through the hollow dark. It wasn't a growl or a screech. It was a wet, clicking chitter. thousands of mandibles in unison, a sound that bypassed the ear and settled in the ancient parts of the brain. It came from everywhere, tunnels in the black, cracks above. "Contact!" Rico shouted, but didn't know where to aim. And then they emerged from the shadows. They wore the shape of men, but it was a mockery. Taller than humans with limbs too long, bending at impossible angles. Their skin was pale, like the belly of a grub, stretched tight over knotted muscle and jagged bone. Where eyes should have been, there was only wrinkled, seamless flesh. A blind sentence. Their jaws unfolded, faces opening to reveal rows of bone-needled teeth. They moved with a jerking, silent swiftness, like raptors, claws screeching across stone. The first dropped from the ceiling, silent as dust, behind Lieutenant Wallace. Before our eyes could process, a long arm punched through his chest, bursting from the sternum like a bloody stake. He exhaled softly, eyes wide with terminal astonishment. The creature tore its arm free and Wallace folded to the ground. The world narrowed to muzzle flashes and our screams. "Fire!" I shouted, the cave devouring the sound. Rico answered with his M249, its roar becoming a blind, hammering prayer. Tracers carved glowing wounds across the creature's pale hide. It screamed a pitch so sharp my teeth ached. It staggered, but didn't fall. Two more stepped out of the black. My shotgun spoke its single word, and the face of the nearest one became torn meat, but it didn't stop. I fired again. Its skull became a wet gospel of bone and flesh against the wall. "They're everywhere," Doc shouted. His M4 barked in short, hopeless bursts. "Fall back!" But the exit was blocked. More creatures spilled from the tunnel's maw, their chittering a dissonant, mind-rending noise. We were buried. One pounced on Rico as his belt ran dry. He shoved the barrel into its gaping mouth, but the weapon clicked empty. The thing seized the gun, bent the steel. Another hit him from the side. Its claws tore through armor and flesh like gauze. His last scream broke with the sound of snapping bone. I saw his legs kick feebly as they dragged him into the dark. "Rico's down! He's gone!" I yelled into the radio. "Hold on, Sergeant, I'm coming!" Deacon's voice, sharp and steady. "Buy time!" One hit me from the side. Its weight was truth, heavy and brutal. Its breath smelled of graves. Its teeth scraped against my visor, searching for a seam. I shoved the shotgun under its chin and pulled the trigger. The recoil crushed into my shoulder and the creature's head vanished. I crawled away, drew my sidearm. "Doc! On me!" I saw Doc Miller kneeling beside Wallace's remains. A man of medicine was nothing here. He just stared at the carnage, at a body broken beyond science. "Miller, move!" I screamed. He looked up, face pale as the moon in shock. Two creatures approached him from both sides. He didn't make a sound as they took him apart. The wet crackle of human collapse would live inside me forever. I was alone. The chittering circle closed in. I was already dead, just breathing in a mountain's reeking gut. Then a rifle cracked from the entrance. The creature creeping toward me dropped, a hole blown through its chest. "Jake! This way!" Deacon. He stood in the narrow tunnel, a man from a better world. His sniper rifle, an instrument of distance, was now a club in the tight quarters. Shot after shot, each one a commandment finding flesh in the dark, buying me one more breath. I slipped past him. "They're gone," I rasped. "They're all gone." "I know," he said, face like granite as he chambered another round. "We need to seal the tunnel. Hold them here." He blasted the rock wall, collapsing a partial barricade of rubble into the tunnel. A pathetic barrier against eternal hunger. The two of us against the hive, trapped in the forge. Beyond the stones, they clawed and scratched ravenous. The chittering never stopped. "How many mags?" Deacon asked. "2 for my pistol. You?" "1.5. 20 rounds." Not enough. Nowhere near enough. "Sarah," I whispered. Her name was a prayer to a deaf god. I saw her face, the swell of her belly where our child grew. A dry laugh escaped me. "Don't you dare, Jake," Deacon said, soft but firm. "Don't fade. Stay with me." He was right. I pushed the ghosts away. "Okay, plan?" He looked toward the light. "We can't hold here. They'll break through or wait us out. One shot, run for the bird, and call in fire." "Through the camp? They might be out there too. Better out there, under God, than in here." The noise surged. A pale, 3-fingered hand slipped through the crack. I fired. It vanished with a shriek. "Now or never," Deacon said. He pulled a grenade. "On my signal, I toss. You run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Get to the bird. Call down fire on this goddamn mountain." "What about you?" He smiled, tired and short. "Sniper's job is to cover the retreat." He pressed a small crucifix into my palm, still warm from his chest. "Go home, Jake." Number together. No time for both. His voice was steel. The barricade shuddered. Stone shifted, showing a jagged grin. "You've got something to go back to. I've got sins. Go!" The pin flew. He counted 2 heartbeats, then hurled the grenade. "The Lord is my shepherd," he roared into the dark. I didn't hesitate. The grenade flew. I ran. Through the slick corridor toward the light, faster than I thought a man could run. The blast shoved me with a giant's hand. Behind it, his rifle cracking, the shrieks of the damned, and the song of one good man's last stand. I burst into the blinding sun, clean air washing over me like an undeserved blessing. I ran without looking back, through the dead camp, past silent bunks and frozen games. The shadows of 68 men ran with me. Near the Black Hawk, it dropped from the comms tent roof. It had found another way out. A massive brute, its hide marked with old scars, blocked the path. It hissed in triumph, face splitting open. My pistol was a dead weight. The rifle was gone in the cave. There was no soldier left in me, only the animal that sees its grave. I grabbed the heavy wrench from the Humvee. The thing struck, claws slicing through armor and chest. Fire bloomed inside me, but it didn't matter. I swung the wrench, pouring every ounce of fear and fury into it. Felt the crack of its skull like a watermelon against stone. It staggered. I swung again and again, until its eyeless face was nothing but pulp. It collapsed, twitching. I stood over it, breath sawing in my chest, fire in my ribs, the crucifix clenched in my fist. I stumbled into the Black Hawk and collapsed onto the radio, leaving a bloody smear. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," I croaked in a stranger's voice. "This is Sergeant Carter, Ares 1. Kilo 7, compromised. Bring fire, everything you have. Burn it. Burn the mountain." I woke in a white hospital room in Landstuhl, Germany. Clean sheets felt foreign on my skin. Sarah was asleep in a chair, hand resting on her swollen belly where our son waited. For a moment I believed it had all been a nightmare in a land of dust. But each breath lit a fire in my chest, stitches pulled tight, bandages heavy, reminders of the truth. Men in immaculate uniforms sat behind a polished table and listened. I told them about the cave, the nests of wire and hair, the eyeless things with bone claws, how they took Rico, how they tore apart Doc, how young Wallace fell, how Deacon went to his god, holding the darkness at bay so I could crawl out. I told them everything. The colonel leading the debrief steepled his fingers, looking at me not as a man, but a problem to be managed. "Sergeant," he said, "you suffered massive trauma. The 10th Mountain was overrun by numerous insurgents. In your shock, your mind fabricated a myth to cope with an ugly but comprehensible reality. They dropped fire on the coordinates I gave, turned the mountain to glass, buried the cave, and the truth with it. The official report would say it was an ambush, overwhelming enemy forces, one survivor, mind fractured, a cleaner story. They gave me a medal for my blood and a discharge packet that said I was fit to live. I came home, held my wife, watched the birth of my son, Leo. I try to be the man they deserve. But when the house is quiet and my eyes close, I'm back in the gut of the mountain. I see pale limbs flashing in muzzle bursts, hear the endless wet chittering, the sound of a man coming apart in the dark, the last prayer of Deacon echoing into black. The survivor is never whole. Parts of you stay where your brothers fall. Part of me is still under that stone and fire, in the shadow of the Devil's Forge. And on nights when the world is silent, I feel the weight of the dark and think a cold, stony thought. They buried the truth in a file, sealed one grave with rubble. But what if there are more crypts like it, hidden in the high, forgotten places of the world? What if the dark didn't die, just went still? I survived. But the war isn't over. It breathes in the silence of the night, against an enemy no one has seen. And I am the lone sentry on a wall no one knows exists. That's all for tonight. If this story got under your skin, give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. Chilling tales, dark secrets, and nightmares lurking in the shadows. We'll meet again in the next episode of Night Bites. Scary story. Sleep tight, if you still can.